Today I'm excited to announce our first ever cross stitch club. We all know cross stitch is on fire and I'm so glad. That's really where my love of creating started decades ago, and it just kind of fell away, and next thing I know I became a quilter and I've been very happy. But I'm also happy when I'm at the airport or traveling and I've got cross stitch in my hands, because goodness knows I can't be sitting at my sewing machine. So you are invited to join our first ever club. This is called Farmhouse Christmas, the Cross Stitch Ornament Club. There's a company out there that the way they design, I absolutely love their patterns. Little House Needleworks. If you're a cross stitcher, you already know that name. And we chose 4 of her designs from that series she did, and you're seeing all 4 of them. And I love her idea of taking the cross stitch and converting it into an ornament that is just so adorable to display. I mean, can you just imagine this on a, in a real farmhouse or on your Christmas tree, or maybe giving as an amazing gift. So here's how we're going to be running our club. We know that many of you already have a whole drawer or cabinet full of embroidery floss. So we're making our DMC embroidery floss set an option for you. So you can choose that or not. For me, I just choose it, right? Even if I have the floss, I don't know. It's just nice having it. Each month you'll be getting the Aida cloth. We'll be using a 14 count. This is actually a Lori Holt. It's kind of got this nice model look. This is Zweigart. This is made in Germany. 14 count works well for everyone. I know if you're an advanced cross stitcher, you may be stitching on linen. We wanted to make this so beginner friendly because while many of us did cross stitch decades ago, there's a whole new generation of makers that are just discovering cross stitch. And this is why we went ahead and committed to the 14 count. It's just fun for everyone. You'll be getting your backing fabric. You'll also be getting some what's called jute. That's what is our hanging loop here. And then we found this really cool, very textured, very kind of vintage looking ribbon that will be tying our bow. And I've already filmed a video on this, so you can stay at the end of this overview video and check that out. And you can see this is totally easy, beginner friendly. On the set here are some of the things that you might want to grab when you get your spot in our club. I specifically use this tool here. It's a 1.5 inch by 12.5 inch. We're measuring basically 3/4 of an inch over from our outermost cross stitch all the way around to begin trimming our cross stitch in preparation for putting this and converting it into a Christmas ornament. If you've already got some rulers at home, I'm sure those would work for you, but maybe you don't. If that's true, and maybe you don't have those yet, be sure to pick up a rotary cutter as well as that 1.5 by 12.5, or any one of our Creative Grid rulers will really do a great job. So my favorite way to trim up is to use an exact ruler, and Creative Grid does have a 6-inch ruler. Obviously does very well with a spinning mat. The easiest way is to center this right over top of your pressed cross stitch, making sure everything is completely equal all the way around. Make a cut using a rotary cutter, rotate that mat, and you're cutting it on all 4 sides. We all know that if you're a cross stitcher, you probably have many of these supplies, but again, maybe you're not. For me, in the beginning, I was so excited as a cross stitcher. I didn't have any of that. I didn't know what things like floss bobbins were, right? You know you're not going to use all of this embroidery floss in these 4 ornaments, but you're not going to throw that away. That's the beauty of the floss bobbins. Any unused embroidery floss is wrapped around these. And in the day, we used to use a permanent marker and write the number on here. But DMC now, I love this, has created stickers. You could still write that if you want to, but make sure you're using a permanent marker and make sure it doesn't smear. That was kind of my classic. It smeared often. But I love the idea of the stickers here. A variety of needles. For me, I love to do cross stitch with a tapestry size 24 or 26. So we've got a couple different brands, Peacemakers, but when I've been stitching with lately, or Bowen, I love that. Made in France here. Richard Hemmings size 4 needles for doing a little bit of our whip stitching. I did that in the video. Any needle you have that you'll be able to do a little whip stitch will work. And then I have a Schmetz sewing machine needle because we did a little bit of machine sewing all the way around from our Aida cloth and our backing fabric right side together. Turned that through. We used our point turner. This is a very, very important tool. Use that extensively to get these 4 corners out and to push the stuffing into those corners. So you'll be needing to get some of your own stuffing. You know, it's readily available. I'm seeing stuff like that at Hobby Lobby, kind of in the craft section of Walmart, etc. Very bulky for us to ship, so pick that up on your own. But the main thing is get in the Stitchery Club. I just love having something to look forward to. It's very manageable. I know what that's like to get a shipment. That's just like, there's no way I can get this done in a month. You can easily get that done in a month. Get your ornament done and look forward to that. And have 4 incredible ornaments to display or maybe give as a gift. So head to the Shabby website right now. Join us for our first ever cross stitch club and pick up any notions you might need.